Okay. So one of my favorite movies is Reservoir Dogs, directed by Quentin Tarantino. I don't know if you guys seen it. It's one of his earlier movies. He considered it to be his first, but it's not really his first. Well, in the opening, just to set up the scene here, you have 8 bad guys, or criminals, all getting ready to rob a jewelry store. But before you rob a jewelry store, obviously you need to have a full stomach. So they all come to a diner and eat breakfast, chill, and wait till they actually do the job. And towards the end, they got to throw in some money for a tip because their boss is paying for it, and they're just gonna pay for the tip. So there's one character called Mr. Pink, where he goes on this long rant about why he doesn't believe in tipping. And he goes on to list, I don't care, it's their fault, they don't make enough money, then they can, it's their fault, they can find another job. Well, when you see that scene, it's supposed to set up the fact that, Mr. Pink's kind of a jerk. That, he doesn't really think about waitresses or, doesn't care about the serving industry despite how, messed up it is. But as I was researching into it, I found out that tipping really isn't all that great. Now, I'm not, being mean here and saying that, we shouldn't tip. But really, we should probably take a closer look at what, goes into tipping. So today, I'll be talking about the history of tipping, why it's an inconvenience to the servers, to the customers, and what we should do about it. Okay, so let's talk about where it came from. The history of tipping, according to Business Insider, in the article, Anti-Tipping Policy is Not New, actually came from Europe, surprisingly enough. After the Civil War, soldiers that were in Europe were like, oh my God, I never even seen tipping before. Because tipping was something, the Europeans did and the posh class did. And so they brought it to the U.S. But when they brought it to the U.S., at first it was actually met with a lot of hate. They saw it as being super undemocratic. Because in Europe, you would, throw a few euros and be like, hey, serve me before that guy. And then, it was just kind of like the rich making sure that they got better treatment than, the poorer people. And it's actually where the word tip came from. It means to ensure prominence, which, means just to hurry up and give me my order. So they brought it here and everyone's like, oh my God, we can't do this. This is so undemocratic, Americans should be able to be served at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. It was so unpopular that 6 states actually made laws against tipping to make sure that no one tipped. And if they did, they would actually be fined. But, as for all the democracy or whatever, we actually ended up using tipping after the Prohibition started. Because, without the sale of alcohol, money was dropping from the restaurants left and right. And so the bosses, smart idea, they're like, hey, if we allow the customers to tip, then we don't have to pay the servers full price. And so that's what they did. It's actually still going on right now. It's actually a law in some states that if the tips make up what you're supposed to get paid, then they don't have to pay you that amount because your tips actually technically made your pay. Okay, so, and then we're going to talk about why this is actually really inconvenient to the servers. So, you guys all have bosses. If you work, you have bosses. Sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're jerks. But, for the most part, you only have one boss that you really have to suck up to. But if you're a server, every customer is your boss. It all depends, if you're relying on tips, whether they like you or not. So, of course, you got to suck up to every single customer, even if they're nice, if they're jerks, if they're young, if they're old. But, and you're never even sure if they're going to tip you right. Of course, you say, oh, well, if I'm just an amazing server, then they'll tip me more. It's actually not true. According to a study done by Cornell University, no matter how amazing the service is, it really only averages about to 1.5% raise in your tips. In fact, people tip for so many random reasons. Maybe they have a lot of money that day, they're drunk, they like you, or, they just want to feel like they're doing good. Cornell also did a study to see the top waitresses and waiters and see what, made them actually get more tips, and it's completely random. Some people write thank you on the receipt, other people wear flowers in their hair, or they squat down by your table, to be eye level. It doesn't really matter. None of these things are consistent. So tipping isn't consistent, which also is a bad thing because that means the server's pay are not consistent. And again, even with all this amazing service, it still doesn't really matter, because in other places like Japan, Australia, where they don't tip, the service is still the same, because it's a job. You're not supposed to, it's not like you're going to go to a clothing store and be like, hey, this lady didn't help me with my clothes, I'm just not going to pay her. Or like you tell your boss, don't pay you because you didn't help me find clothes. And then going to the customer side of things, it really is, for the customers, it's more of a social standard than it really is like, you're supposed to do it. Like sales tax, it's not by law you have to tip. We just feel the need to tip. I mean, try going out with a group of friends and not throwing in, your fair share of the tip. Everyone's going to think you're an asshole. And so you're forced to tip. And we're not even doing it right. When we took it from the Europeans, you're supposed to give it ahead of time to ensure that you got the best, treatment. We do it at the end, so it doesn't really matter whether or not we tip, big or small. We already got our service. We already know what happened. We're not ensuring any provenance or whatever. So there's really no point to tipping. Besides, sometimes we end up paying more than we really should, or paying less than we should to the waiters. And it's also just a huge inconvenience to kind of, why do we have to pay for the server's salary? That sounds mean, but why do we do that? You don't go to buy a pair of shoes and then the boss asks you, okay, so is the person that helped you out going to eat tonight? Your choice. Oh no, I don't want to tip. Okay, then I guess he doesn't eat tonight. So, and that's what bosses use it to do. Here in California, if you've ever been a server, you probably haven't really experienced it, because California has so many laws against tipping, like the badness of tipping, and for bosses to make sure that they actually do tip. Actually, not that long ago, in California, they awarded Starbucks baristas $105 million because the tips weren't going to them. They were going to their supervisors, just supervisors. So what can we do about tipping? Well, I'm not telling you guys to go and just immediately stop tipping and ruin the serving industry. But we should probably take a closer look and see, are these people actually getting paid, and the tips are just a bonus? Or are these people, trying to get you to give them tips, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to eat tonight. And so really we should kind of just look at it, look at our pay. If you're a server, question yourself, am I really getting paid what I should be? And in the end, tipping isn't really a good thing, but for now we just got to do it. Thank you for listening.
Well, since Ray never made it in, let's see. Who have we got here?
I can do it. I didn't get to do Ray's.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll work out fine. We'll have you do it then.
The oral evaluation?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your topic. I think it's something that not a lot of people talk about. Like he said, it's like tipping is like a social construct, so people kind of just do it. I think you explained yourself really well, and you only used your cards when you really needed to, cite something. And you're really well spoken, so you speak to the audience you're really confident. And yeah, I don't know, I really liked it.
So you give up tipping?
I work at Baskin Robbins, and sometimes they tip us, but we don't expect to get tipped,
Man, and they work hard because they do all the scooping themselves,
Peanut butter ice cream?
Yeah, that's tough stuff. That's tough stuff. All right. I like the topic. I thought that it was interesting, and the opening is fine. Thank you for refraining from the language that Mr. Pink uses in arguing for his position. That would not be appropriate for this audience. But you kind of set the issue up. You're a little bit on the fence. It's like you're not coming straight out and saying, look, this is foolish and you should stop doing this and we should have a movement to end tipping because it's just ridiculous. Pay people what they're worth, make sure that they're doing their job, and let's get rid of this tipping nonsense, which is so undemocratic and random in the first place. That's really what your argument is, but it's kind of buried underneath this, I don't want to say, almost a defensive position that you're taking because you're trying to be fair to people who are working hard, and you recognize that some people need to get by on that. I think you need to make an argument that says that the way we do this social construct is problematic, that we've kind of made it a part of the fabric, and there's time, it's time for us to maybe change that fabric a little bit. And I think there are other ways that you could make that argument. For example, if we're going to have $15 an hour as the minimum wage, do we really think we need to be tipping people on top of that? There's a change that's going on right now. The government is taxing people on their tips. You need to explain how that process works and say, that there's a negative consequence to people getting gratuities anyway. There's this extra burden that's placed on them. The notion that tip is required because it's a social standard needs to be changed. And there are places that we could start changing that. For example, restaurants could establish particular policies that ask people not to add to the, add a gratuity. Say our servers are well trained and happy with the job that they have, that sort of thing. Please don't, it's like, please don't feed the bears, when you drive through Yellowstone, same sort of thing. Please don't, do that sort of thing. I don't know how you ever get over, a social construct like this until there's some, major effort that's made, and I think you need to kind of develop that a little bit more. It's presented very well. I'd agree with Karen about that. I think you do a good job speaking to us. I think you can move around a little bit more. You're going to discover that you are mostly behind the heads of the two people here when you watch your video. That's just, I tried to move the camera a little bit, but you happen to be in that exact spot, the whole time. And it wouldn't be as big a deal if you took a step to the right or a step to the left at any given point. You'd have hardly noticed it, but because of the way it was, that was just a little bit problematic. All right, thank you.